All right. So, welcome, YouTube. We're just letting the notifications get out as normal. So, just be a minute or two before we get fired up. Actually, I've got some music to play. I've changed up the music. So, where are we? Here, rock. Hello, bird nerds. Changed it up with the music today, so we're rocking a bit more. Hey, oh look, Naomi's already noticed it. Hey, bird nerds, I'm Grant. I'm a bird nerd. That guy, hang on, which way? That guy over there, that's Gregory Andrews. Uh, Gregory's the Gregory's the brains behind Lyrebird Dreaming and Wombat Ridge, but also a former threatened species commissioner in the federal government, and 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 a public servant of some time. How, Gregory? How long did you serve as punishment in
Yeah,
the
actually,
public service?
I was a public servant for 31 years, and I joined the public service when I finished my first degree back in 1992. And I have to say, until the Robo-Debt Royal Commission, notwithstanding all the challenges that we face, I was proud of I was proud of being a public service servant. And the public service isn't perfect, but Australia's public service, compared to many public servant services in the world, is pretty good, or I thought it was, until the Robo-Debt Royal Commission, which I thought was deeply, deeply shameful, and really exposed the dysfunction uh, and and systemic corruption, really, of our public service that occurred under over the last 10 years or so.
Which, which departments were you working in? I mean, when you were threatened species commissioner, did that mean you were seconded out of one part of the public service into a different one? Like how does
No, so when I was the Threatened Species Commissioner, I was part of the Environment Department, um, which is an interesting structural arrangement. But I joined the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade back in 1992 and worked for most of my career either at DFAT and I went on postings to China and Japan and finished up there as Australia's ambassador to 9 countries in West Africa at the end of 2001, a bit over a year ago. But when I was the Threatened Species Commissioner, I wasn't actually an independent commissioner. I was a senior executive in the Environment Department. I think we discussed that once before. Like, a lot of people perceive commissioners to be independent, but actually Australia's Threatened Species Commissioner isn't independent. Australia's Threatened Species Commissioner is a senior public servant in the Environment Department, accountable to the Secretary of the Department of Environment and the Minister of the day.
Yeah, I think we briefly sort of touched on that, and we did say we would talk about that another day.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
So that will be another day, because we have another topic today. Now, everybody, and actually Naomi, hi, haven't seen you for a while, so I was worried if you were okay. Gregory's got post-COVID. I don't want to call it syndrome, but
asthma.
Yeah. And Polly Hemming, who was going to be joining us, emailed us both yesterday to say that Polly's back at work today after a bit of time off, having gone to the United Nations and whatnot, and a bit of time off. But someone in the office at the Australia Institute has COVID, and Polly's had to jump in and all shoulders to the wheel. I think that's the way we say. So she's had to pick up some slack there today. So Polly will be with me at some stage, and we can talk about more particularly the policy aspects that Polly's an expert in. But what I wanted to start with today, because what's frustrated me with this whole safeguard mechanisms, and even though the climate policy and the biodiversity policy are different, the government seems to have the same approach. So we'll talk about Gregory's perspective on a couple of matters, but I want to put my bias well and truly out there and play a short video by, look, I'm such a fanboy of Juice Media.
Hello, I'm from the Australian Government. Last year, we legislated our 2030 emissions target, a symbolic achievement. But the real question now is, how will we reach that target? And today, we're here to unveil the policy that answers that question. Introducing the Safeguard Mechanism. After a wasted decade under the last government, we know you elected us to take real climate action. Thankfully, the shit party set the bar so low, we could come up with a shit light policy and you'd still applaud us for it. So that's what we've done. Safeguard Mechanism. To be honest, it's not even our policy. That's right. The best part of the Safeguard Mechanism is it's made from recycled materials, which we got from the previous government. It was brought in by this prick to safeguard the coal and gas industry. So we thought, hey, if it ain't broke, why fix it? So we just tweaked it, stuck our logo on it, and voila, reintroducing the Safeguard Mechanism, or as we call it, S&M, because it'll hurt the planet, make it all hot and wet, but you'll love it. Because it's a Labor policy, except it's not. Fuck you. Safeguard Mechanism. If passed by Parliament, our repackaged shit-light Safeguard Mechanism will safeguard the coal and gas industry for the rest of this decade. Because let's be clear, the only way humanity currently knows how to reduce actual emissions is simple. Stop fucking digging up new coal and gas. Which is why the science says that's what we must do. Does the Safeguard Mechanism do that? Yeah, nah. That's why we still have over 100 new coal and gas projects awaiting approval. All the Safeguard does is force them to buy carbon credits to offset their emissions. Not all their emissions, just a tiny bit of another tiny part of their emissions. Which might sound like an incentive until you remember fossil fuel companies made this much profit last year alone. So the cost of buying credits to avoid reducing their actual emissions comes to approximately fuck all. Does the Safeguard at least limit how many credits they can buy? No, which means our mates can even increase emissions, pay to offset them with credits and still claim to be net zero. Given our climate policy relies entirely on carbon credits, it would be a real shame if those credits turned out to be bullshit. Thankfully, we just held an inquiry into their integrity, and who better to appoint to it than people linked to the carbon credit industry. But don't worry, the inquiry looked at all the evidence from the ANU, evidence the inquiry itself commissioned, even evidence from companies that sell carbon credits, all of which suggests they're mostly bullshit, and then concluded they're essentially sound, cool and normal. By now you're probably wondering, if our policy to reach our 2030 target doesn't stop new coal and gas projects, doesn't reduce most emissions from existing ones, lets them buy infinite credits to offset emissions with credits that don't offset emissions, does it really do anything? Oh, sweetie, sure it does. It distracts you with bullshit so our mates can keep making the ching-ching for the rest of this decade. Australian government. New government, same climate shit fuckery. Authorised by the Department for ensuring our 2030 target is a floor, not a ceiling.
Thank you to all our patrons for making the Honest Government ads possible, especially our patron producers. If you want to help us keep governments honest, you can do so at patreon.com/The Juice Media, or you can grab some merch from our store. You'll find all the links in the video description. Till next time.
All right, had to run the little ad at the end because, yes, do go and support the Juice Media if you like people poking fun at power. Gregory, after 9 years in opposition, how have we got to a point where we've got a government that appears to not really have any idea what to do with, well, biodiversity particularly, but reducing emissions and preserving biodiversity when all they seem to be able to do is lean into fairly conservative, business-friendly policies that, as I think we've found out, we're not actually reducing actual emissions. We are reducing them in a bookkeeping sense, but we're not reducing emissions. And when it comes to biodiversity, offsetting for biodiversity isn't reducing biodiversity loss. It's theoretically allowing for the retention of biodiversity. But if you destroy biodiversity in one spot where the biodiversity is known, and you have an area where the same biodiversity could possibly exist, but you haven't proven it, how does that make any sense in today's world?
Yeah, look, actually, you've raised a lot of different issues, important issues there. But for me, I think actually the thing that made me happy yesterday, if I could answer that by two things. One, something that made me cross this morning was reading on the ABC that Woodside and Chevron, which are two of the companies covered by the safeguard mechanism, they just increased their emissions last year by 5% each. So they're already under the previous government's so-called safeguard mechanism, but their emissions are going up. And also they haven't fulfilled their commitments to actually reduce the emissions that they said they would. The thing that made me happy, though, was yesterday, coming from Newcastle, I went to Newcastle University, and growing up in the Hunter Valley, was seeing a 96-year-old man and a young blind man called Isaacs with 50 other people climb on top of a coal train and stop one of the coal trains from going in Newcastle Harbour, which is the biggest coal exporting port in the world. So there's a lot of discussion about whether the safeguard mechanism will work or not to reduce Australia's domestic emissions and the integrity of the reductions, given that companies can access credits. But also there is a huge number of activities that aren't covered by it, and including the exports of all of our coal and fossil fuels, which are immense. And the environment and nature and the physics of the planet doesn't care where emissions come from. It just cares about the total volume of CO2 and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So, but for me, I think, to answer your question, I think that sort of 20 years of toxic climate change politics has made politicians scared to do what needs to be done for a safe planet, and err on the side of caution. And I think that the current government can be braver and more ambitious and still win the next election. And the fact that a 96-year-old man, a blind man, and 50 other people climbed up on top of a coal train and started shoveling coal out of it, and they were all arrested, it shows these people aren't extremists. They're families, their community members, their granddads, their grandsons. So Australians actually want a safe planet and a safe climate, and the science says we need to do a lot more.
Now, I'm going to bring up a tweet now, and this is a great thread that's going on at the moment. But let's have a look at this, and we'll go over to where are we? We'll go over to which layout we want to go to. No, cancel. That'll do, won't it? We can read this. Now, here's a submission on the Nature Repair Bill from the Mining Council. And Jung and Chi, good on you for going through and reading all this. I've been trying to read it over the weekend. But the Mining Council reckon that they should be one of the people on the committee to oversee who gets the credits for the nature repair market. And the draft legislation provides that a member is not eligible for appointment as a nature repair market committee member unless the member is satisfied that the person has significant standing in at least one of the following fields: agriculture, biological or ecological science, environmental markets, Indigenous knowledge relevant to the functions of the committee, land management and economics. For a start, that seems to be elevating a whole lot of industry sectors that are about exploitation, not about preservation, of elevating economics when we're talking about biodiversity retention to the same level as people with ecological expertise. Now, the Minerals Council of Australia recommends that mining should be included as a field of expertise, and then for the fit and proper person requirements, they've noted the Mining Council of Australia recommends that the fit and proper person requirements should not have regard to pecuniary penalties, meaning all the shit fuckery that we've done before, don't worry about that. Such matters should not preclude individuals or companies from engaging in projects to improve biodiversity outcomes. Fines for incidents like blowing shit up. Fines for incidents may not indicate intent or a lack of responsibility. This is why shit fuckery is a perfect label for what's going on, and why I think we can just recognise that the government is completely captured. I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but why would the Mineral Council of Australia be included with what would be thought of as equivalent expertise to ecologists?
Yeah, it sounds like a conflict of interest to me. I trained as an economist in my first degree, and I actually got first class honours in econometrics, which is mathematical economic modelling. But I suppose maybe because of that, I try not to be. I don't want to be negative about the role of markets, and so I try to be open minded about it.
I really need to stop you there for a minute though, Gregory, because show me a market anywhere in the world that has worked without the government steering it and deciding how it works.
Yeah, so let me finish what I was going to say, which is actually, like on the positive side, like the animals and plants don't care about whether the land they're on is public or private or where the money comes from. And I own 50 hectares of land which I manage for conservation, and it's a protected area and it's private land. And I'm pretty confident I'm doing my best on that with my family, with cultural burning and science-based regeneration initiatives. But all of that said, there's benefits potentially with new funding streams, but the risks are really high. And I think you just raised, what I think is the biggest of three risks that I see. And the first risk is the potential commodification of nature, where we can lead to a situation where conservation efforts are only pursued where financial benefits exist. And just like we have all these franchises and, McDonald's everywhere, that the market for nature will be the same. So it can be really distorted because markets aren't perfect, and nature could be commodified, and there'll be winners and losers, just like there are in regional Australia, where Aldi or Kmart might be a winner, but then the local shops and other economic activities become losers. So I think there's a risk where species and habitats have to depend on commercial rather than science-based priorities. But also I think another huge risk is the risk that we've already seen with carbon markets, where credits can be used to offset or even create negative impacts rather than genuinely supporting conservation efforts. And when I protected our property, Wombat Ridge, I intentionally made the decision not to accept any credits. I could have earned credits through biobanking and got paid to subsidise my efforts. But I didn't want to do that because that would simply be endorsing environment degradation elsewhere. And, we've really seen this in carbon markets with analysis from the Australia Institute, which is worth a read. But also back to the nature markets, the submissions from the Humane Society, the Australian Conservation Foundation, the Wilderness Society, they all urge that biodiversity credits be barred from use as environmental offsets because I think in the words of the Wilderness Society, financialising or commercialising the destruction of nature, by doing that, offsets allow destructive players to continue business as usual. So I think that there's some really big risks associated with it. But also, if you have a look, what are the top, 8 to 10 things that have proven over the last 20 years to arrest biodiversity loss? I don't think markets come up there. It's protected area, it's establishment, creation, maintenance of protected areas, it's habitat restoration, it's sustainable agricultural practices and sustainable fisheries, it's building wildlife corridors to improve biodiversity connectivity, it's invasive species management, it's climate change mitigation and adaptation, and it's education and outreach. They're the things that have proven, that science has proven to work for biodiversity recovery.
My concern, Gregory, is that what the government is doing in in rushing to get the money, I think this is what it's all about. It's to get the money so that the government doesn't have to spend the money, to get the money from private industry to whether it's the finance sector or mining sector or whatever, to ensure that government doesn't have to spend it. But what we are not looking at is the track record. Let's just talk about the Mining Council for a minute. I'd like somebody, anybody, and this is an open challenge to anybody, to show me any mine site, anywhere in the world, which when it was decommissioned and rehabilitated has equivalent or greater biodiversity than before the mining project. Anywhere, any mining, any site, anywhere in the world. And if anyone can do it, I will stick this spoon up my bum and you can watch, right? I'll humiliate myself. Prove it. Because it hasn't happened. And in most cases in Australia, the mining industry walks away from rehabilitation knowing that when they walk away, there are no significant penalties, and the people who have to do the rehabilitation then is the government, or they put it out to other consultants on the public dime.
So actually, I want to respond to that with one point that you probably won't like and one that you will. But the point that you won't like, I want to emphasise, I'm not making an excuse for the mining companies. But when my point with that is we need minerals. Like I'm chatting to you on my iMac computer and I've just had a cup of tea with my teapot that's made of steel. But so we need minerals. Mines
that isn't the issue, and that's a red herring. That's a red herring.
No, let me finish, please. Mines, when you look at Australia, are pinpricks. When you fly over Australia, they're pinpricks that are damaged severely. And I agree. I would like them to be restored to the original condition. But mine sites are not major drivers of biodiversity depletion and extinction in Australia.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but the point I'm making, Gregory, is, and I agree that a mine site on its own is not one of the major drivers. But the Mining Council were just saying today that they're the experts in the land management. My point is, it's not about we don't need minerals or anything. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that having the people who don't do the repair, but who say that they are the experts because they're involved in it. That's where I talk about the shit fuckery. It's not about needing mines.
Let me finish. I haven't finished because I was responding to your point, not about the mining industry being involved in the policy settings for market offsets. I was responding to your point about show me a mine anywhere in the world that's has been restored perfectly. Now, but what my point is that mine sites aren't major drivers of extinction in Australia, according to the science, except for fossil fuel extraction, which is because of climate change. But we're missing something here, which I think is really important, which is that the government can do something that costs it nothing except legislation, and that's deliver on the commitment that it actually made before the election to bolster Australia's national environment protection laws and introduce new standards for development assessments. And so before embarking on sort of market ideas and nature repair markets, the government can do something that doesn't really cost it anything except for, a bit of paper and bureaucratic work. And that's actually legislate to implement stricter laws to protect the environment and then police those
and
laws.
then enforce it. Yeah.
Yeah,
See, where
so that was what the Australian Conservation Foundation urged Minister Plibersek to do in its submission on the nature these market mechanisms for nature, and that was to deliver on the government's commitment to bolster the national environmental laws. And I think that's the single most important thing that the government can do, and that's the role of government, to make laws and to actually police those laws. So that's what I would like to see, and because the laws apply to everyone, not just mines, but they should apply to agriculture, all landowners and land users.
but I can't let that pass, Greg. We're in furious agreement too, by the way.
Yeah.
In that I'm not saying that iron ore mines or lithium mines or whatever are the major drivers of environmental degradation or biodiversity loss. That is not the point. The point is that having an industry that has obligations to be involved in land repair and rehabilitation that usually doesn't meet those obligations. That's my point, that they usually do not fulfill their end of the bargain, to then be saying to the government, because we are land managers, we have expertise to then judge the worthiness of biodiversity offsets for other people. That's where it's bullshit, and that's where I'm grumpy about it. Yeah. But the other thing that I'm grumpy about with this, and where I want to be led to some other conclusion, is that the government hasn't talked about what's effective and what has proven to work. Again, I've got the tweet up here, and it cites or tweets Forrest Fleischman, someone who's done a lot of work looking at these issues. There are not examples around the world of where this stuff has worked. So is my frustration with the government is, why not focus on what works rather than what industry wants? Industry want to spend their money on something which has not been proven to work. So if it hasn't been proven to work, why do they want to spend the money? And they want to spend the money because there's a profit in it for them. I just can't see the positive benefit for biodiversity. And also, sorry, I just want to tease out the argument for people too. There's a difference between repairing land which has been degraded and improving land that has been degraded and allowing intact habitat to be degraded. And I think they should be completely separated. But they're not trying to do that, are they?
Oh, look, I don't know. I haven't really looked at it in detail, to be honest. Because, we started off talking about what I'm doing, but the number one thing I'm doing at the moment is being a full-time dad while my wife goes back to work. And then, I like to escape from all the toxic politics in Australia and go out to Wombat Ridge. So, like last week, I was out there cultural burning, which probably wasn't that great for my lungs when I was recovering from COVID asthma. But I actually was trying to think of some examples of markets working. And to be honest, I couldn't think of any that I know and I could put my hand on. Like I've heard of some, like in Chesapeake Bay in the US, where they've managed to get nitrogen and phosphorus and sediment levels down through a credit and trading system. And a few examples in Costa Rica, but they're academic examples. I don't know. I can't put my hand on my heart and say they work. What I can say when I put my hand on my heart is I can say eastern quolls are doing really well in Mulligan's Flat here in Canberra, thanks to a predator-proof fence that was built. inside Mulligan's Flat now. It's like Australia used to be before the feral animals arrived, and then eastern quolls from Tasmania. So science-based reintroduction of threatened species, and actually the science basis for it means looking at the whole trophic scale of what used to be in the ecology there and what can be brought back at different levels to try and restore it. That's worked quite well. I think about things like humpback whales have recovered really well since the ban on commercial whaling in 1979.
But we didn't pay the whalers who exited the industry
No, that's right.
obscene amounts of public money to.
Great desert skinks are doing really well in the desert, a lot better than we thought they were, thanks to more active monitoring, engagement and management by Indigenous rangers. And then like on Norfolk Island, the Norfolk Island green parrot, while I was the commissioner, I think its numbers went from about 40 to about 250. And I think, I may be wrong, but I think there's over 1,000 of them now. And so again, these initiatives where I've seen recovery occur, they haven't necessarily included markets as a key driver. That said, Mulligan's Flat, part of the costs for the construction of the fence, I think, was from offsets from the ACT government's offset system. But what I mentioned before, the things that the science says work are protected areas, and including maintaining those protected areas, habitat restoration, sustainable agriculture and fisheries, wildlife corridors, invasive species control, climate change, action on climate change, and also education and outreach, which is why I like coming on your show, because we need more people to care. We need more people like Alan, the 96-year-old man who blocked the coal train yesterday in Newcastle. We need people to be aware and to be concerned about the state of the planet, that for both the safety of humanity, but also for all the animals and plants that belong on it.
And it's interesting that Alan received quite different treatment than Violet Coco.
That's
received.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's another part of. I mean, admittedly, we don't have Dom Perrottet and his cronies in power, but those laws that allowed for Violet Coco to be arrested and treated the way she was are still in effect, and we have similar ones in Victoria and similar ones in Tasmania. So if the government so chose, or if the police commissioner so chose, the 98-year-old bloke in his wheelchair could have been detained, locked up, and had different laws applied to him. So again, shit fuckery. He might have
been arrested, but I agree with you. He wasn't treated like Violet Coco. But I think the fact that you see, I get really happy and excited and hopeful when I see broad demographics of people participating in climate action or other protests to protect the environment, because we depend on the earth. We forget that it's part of us, and we need it as much as it needs us, or we need it more than it needs us. But also, I think so many people are just living a life unaware of what's happening. And private jets, I mentioned actually before we started.
Can we get into private jets in a minute? Because I want to tie that into my news.
I've got a huge bee in my bonnet about them, because they really represent climate injustice, as well as they represent the climate crisis. What's missing with the safeguard mechanism, because they're not covered by the safeguard mechanism. but also climate injustice, because like less than 1% of people who fly in the world just flying more and more like there's no tomorrow, emitting more and more emissions.
We'll tie that into a minute. I just want to ask you, as an economist, but also someone who's worked developing policy in the environmental department.
Mm.
Now, my understanding is you mentioned Mulligan's Flat, and there's a range of similar projects around the country.
Mm.
Now, my understanding is that if any of these big businesses wanted to put money into any of those kind of projects, they could, and they would attract tax beneficial treatment for investing in them. That's right, isn't it? Nothing's stopping them from doing it.
As long as the organisation is has the public benevolent institution status, the PBI status, then anyone who makes a donation could.
But that's getting the deductible gift recipient. But if Santos or anyone wanted to be involved in a project that had environmental benefits, that's a legitimate cost for business, isn't it? That they can then claim against them.
I'm not a tax law. I'm not a tax law export.
Or they can just sponsor it, and it goes into in as a PR offset.
Most of the
it's a marketing offset.
Activities that do have PBI status, like
but even if they don't, it doesn't cost them any money. It's like it's just like the cost of their CEO's vehicle. In the end, running the vehicle costs them nothing because it's written off against profit.
I don't really know what your point is. Like, it doesn't worry me. Companies actually invest in.
No. I don't have a problem with it. With it. I'm saying they can do this all. They can do all this stuff now if they care about nature. That's my point, and they don't do it.
Yeah.
So what they want is more. They want more slush. I
actually. Look, I don't know. I personally, I don't care if they want to invest in nature as long as the investments have integrity and it's not greenwashing.
Yeah.
And I would like to see more funding attracted to nature conservation, which is why I don't want to be I base my approaches to things on ideas and logic rather than ideology. And so I don't want to be, my instinct is to be extremely careful and, if not dubious of, nature repair market mechanisms, but I don't want to rule them out completely. And I know that people like Hugh Possingham share a similar view. They can play a role if they're governed properly, and if they're not seen as a panacea. And this is what I think organisations like the ACF and the Wilderness Society and the Humane Society International, all of which I worked with when I was the Threatened Species Commissioner and have a lot of respect for, none of them made some submissions to the bill for the nature repair market bill. None of them made submissions that were sort of absolutely opposed, but all of them actually said that it was really important that biodiversity credits be barred from use as offsets.
Because that's the biggest problem.
It creates a financial incentive to destroy nature with the sense that it's going to be protected somewhere else. But that's actually just net zero, even if it's done well. But what we do know is that a lot of offsets don't work or can actually have negative impacts. And again, the ACF its key point, which I agree with, and I would say it's the most important point, and it always has been, is that the Minister Plibersek and the government should deliver on the government's commitment that they made when they were in opposition to bolster our national environment protection laws. And we talk about national security as a hard-edged issue, and we're willing to invest billions of dollars in submarines and other initiatives for national security, but our biosecurity, the security of the ecology that we depend on, is a really important part of our national security as well, I think, and we need to apply strong laws and actually implement those laws and hold anybody who breaks them accountable.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I just want to make sure I reiterate the point that I'm making.
Yeah.
If you've got really valuable, intact, functioning, working ecosystems and habitats, we're at the stage where they should be left alone.
Yeah, I agree.
So
there's enough of Australia. So much of Australia has already been severely degraded, if not destroyed. We're a big country. We've got less than 30 million people. The remaining habitat, we need to stop logging our native forests immediately. We need to stop land clearing. There's enough land cleared to feed Australia and to still create a lot of wealth by exporting agricultural products.
So that's the jumping off point for me. And then this is the point I was trying to make next, and I probably didn't make it in a very good way. But if any business in the country wants to put money into rehabilitating and repairing degraded land, great. But there's nothing stopping them doing it now. But what they all want to do is be able to get their hands on some resource like timber and then be able to do something Mickey Mouse somewhere else and say, oh, it's an offset, biodiversity offset. Oh. And I mean, if you've destroyed the habitat for, I don't know, let's say some particular kind of froglet, and then the offset or the plus side is somewhere where that thing never lived, you haven't done what you said you'd do. Another frog might benefit, but it's not the one that you destroyed. And that's why I just can't see. I can't see the connective tissue where we're trying to say one thing is the other. I'm all for repairing degraded land and improving habitat which has already suffered deleterious effects over whether it be 200 years or 50 years or 25 years, whatever the time frame is. But you don't do it by allowing for some kind of financial penalty or financial input to stuff up something else. That's my point.
Yeah. Look, so I think to round out the conversation, for me, I think given that Australia and the world is facing a biodiversity crisis, we can't afford to be ideological about measures to protect and restore the environment. And like as a trained economist and a private land manager and an Aboriginal person, I'm open to private sector participation and market-based solutions, but they are not a panacea. That they can be one extra tool in the kit. And like every tool, like a chainsaw is a really dangerous tool that I use at Wombat Ridge. Like every tool, they bring significant risks. And just like the Australian Conservation Fund, I'd rather the government start by strengthening laws to protect nature. And in particular, that means ceasing land clearing and native forest logging And given the spiralling impacts of climate change on biodiversity, banning new fossil fuel extraction projects and moving as quickly as possible to something much more comprehensive than the current safeguards mechanism that establishes a zero emissions economy.
Yeah, I mean, I just get really annoyed when they try and throw everything into the one bucket and try and say, by doing this, we'll fix this. And simply, you just got to stop buggering things up and then fix the things we've already buggered up. That's my simple thing. Now, Gregory, I want to invite people now. They can put some questions and whatnot.
Right. And don't forget, I have to have my little bed bug point about private jets.
Well, we're about to get to that, because what I'm going to do is tell everybody the news that I teased, and I've been teasing for a few weeks.
Yeah.
Yesterday, Millie Formby from Wing Threads and I had a long conversation, and I can tell you, everybody, I will be acting as Millie's ground crew starting in the middle of next month, meeting Millie in Rockhampton and accompanying her up the coast to Cairns, and then across to Normanton, down to Mount Isa, across to Tennant Creek, and up to Darwin. So, the reason it's connected to what you were saying, Gregory, one is, hey, everyone, you can support Millie and you can support me if you want. I wouldn't mind if someone supported me. But Millie and I were working out, because Millie did her crowdfunding for defraying the cost of her flight around Australia, and Millie will be reimbursing me for the costs of getting up to Rocky from Melbourne. Now, Gregory, it would cost me to get up there something approaching $700 by bus or train, but I can fly there for $225. Right?
Yeah.
Now, this is the stupid state that we're in, where I can't responsibly, because people have donated money to Millie's flying adventure, I can't responsibly do the right thing by the climate.
Yeah, that is a tough one, isn't it? I feel the same way when I want to go to Perth, and we don't have a high-speed train. Trains emit about 50 times less emissions per person than private jets, and actually, this is a real bugbear that I've got, the emissions from private jets, not just from aviation, but from private jets. And actually, there was an article in The Guardian on the weekend about private jet use in Australia, and most people aren't aware, but in January, there were 320,000 people flew on private charter flights in Australia in January this year. And that's an increase of almost a third since COVID began in 2020. And in Europe, the story's even worse. Private jet flights more than doubled last year. Yeah. And for me, this really just exemplifies the climate injustice as well as climate crisis, where you've got a supremely privileged, super rich minority flying more and more like there's no tomorrow and without restriction. And meanwhile, 80% of the world's population have never been on any type of aeroplane.
That's right. Solution number one.
And these people, the 80% who are bearing the brunt, are actually bearing the worst brunt of the climate crisis as well.
So true. But solution number one for all OECD nations, and maybe any other, if there is a commercial flight available on the same route, that a private plane takes? Not a deductible business expense. Bang.
Well,
First,
yeah. So
because
France
because we
pushing
are
the
we
EU
are
to tighten.
subsidising that use.
Yeah. So this is my point. Like, private jets emit 10 times more CO2 than regular commercial flights, and 50 times more than an average train ride. And a single private jet flight can emit more CO2 than the total emissions of one person for a whole year. And the average private jet flight in Europe, the emissions are 5.9 tonnes per person, and that's more CO2 than driving from Sydney to Perth and back 3 times. So I know France is pushing the EU to tighten rules on private jets and short-haul flights, and Belgium and the Netherlands and Luxembourg and Portugal are actually backing them. Greenpeace is calling for a ban on private jets. But what we need to do is we need to start having these conversations, and it's important that when you raise something like this, you're not branded as an extremist or a radical socialist, because it's actually just a really important. It's the epitome of climate injustice, but it's such waste. And at the moment, Australia isn't acting on it. Our so-called safeguard mechanism doesn't cover private jets. And we need to have the climate doesn't care where emissions come from, and we need durable climate solutions that are fair. If the solutions aren't fair, people won't buy into them and people won't accept them. And the current system where people, the super rich, less than 1% of people who fly can fly and emit 10 times more emissions without any consequences, just doesn't pass the pub test. And it's not going to help us create a safe planet.
And anybody who labels someone who is against flying private jets a radical socialist is a complete and utter wanker, because who built the infrastructure? The society, the governments, taxes, socialism in one sense.
Yeah.
So, I mean, look, if the private planes want to keep flying, I'm all for that. Just build your own fucking airport. Fuck off. Right. Sorry to Chris too, by the way, for swearing.
Yeah.
He'll get grumpy at me.
I actually don't want them to keep flying.
No, neither do I. I want to make it completely uneconomical for them to do it. The only exemption I would give is if you need to go somewhere where there is no other way to get there. Okay, you can fly, but you can't fly to Sydney. You can't fly to Adelaide. You can't fly to Brisbane.
Yeah. So these are the rules that France is pushing in the EU, and that I think it's important for Australia to start having a conversation about before the private jet before this gets out of hand in Australia.
Yeah, it's fraught. I mean, the reason I wanted to bring it up in connection with what I'm doing with Millie's project is about raising awareness for shorebirds and protecting shorebird habitat, right? So there's a good thing in there. But I want to travel a different way. But I basically can't, because I'm using Millie's money for that journey to get there. And that's money that people donated to Millie, right, through the crowdfunding.
It would take you a long time to catch the train. So it's
the time doesn't matter. If it took me 3 weeks longer and I could get there for the same money on a bus or a train, I would do it. I'm not worried about the time.
But a lot of people are. Like, I don't have 3 weeks to go to Rockhampton, or the same to Perth. So we need to find solutions that are zero emission solutions, but also aren't particularly onerous. We have to find solutions as much as possible that help people to still live their lives and exercise all of their responsibilities, but do so in a way that doesn't create a dangerous climate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but look, people who've been listening to me or watching me know.
Yeah.
One of the things that popped up on Twitter today was about fast fashion.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
anybody who's been watching me in the last five or odd years since I've been doing 6 years since I've been doing podcasts, you've seen this T-shirt before because I think I've had this for six years. 5 years, 8 years, my cap, right? I said today I've been wearing the same 10 things over and over for years. Well, I counted it up. Apart from socks and jocks, I have 14 items of clothing. Now, am I fashionable and good looking? No. But I've also chucked none of this shit out, right? So it's not impossible to do, and I'm not expecting anyone to look like me. Okay, I don't think that would be a good idea, especially if you're trying to get out on the pool.
I've got 2 teenagers, and they just want to ask me a question. No, just up a Black Mountain. He can't. Yeah, all right, okay. All right. Sorry, I'm back.
That's all right. You're just locating yourself in case anyone doesn't know you are in Canberra.
I know. I was going to ask them what they thought of private jets, but I know both of them think it's ridiculous. But yeah, look, actually, I lived in Ghana. I saw all of the fashion waste from Australia washing up on the beaches in Ghana, and because 90% of the stuff that gets put in those charity bins is exported, that people put in charity bins, and they assume that someone else is buying it at St Vincent de Paul. Most of it's exported, and most of it goes to Ghana, and more than half of the stuff that arrives in Ghana they can't use, and there's no waste management system there, so it all just washes into the sea. There's and it's all plastic. Clothes aren't, biodegradable anymore. And there are these huge, kind of, how seaweed washes up on the beach and sort of gets a bit tangled? Yeah. There are these huge things that sort of look a bit like icebergs that are fashion waste.
Yep.
And you'll see it says Manly Warringah or different things. You'll see some of it comes from Australia. But all of it is ending up in the world's oceans.
And was
on the need to deal with fashion waste.
The example on Twitter today was that it's now being dumped in the Atacama Desert. So we're filling up the desert in Chile with cheap clothing that people are putting out. And as you rightly said, Gregory, this is again why shitfuckery is such a good word at the moment, right? You get the little coloured bag in your mailbox, in the slot, and you put it out on Thursday, and it says it's going to help whichever charity is on it. Yeah, but it's not.
Well, here in Canberra, the recycling facility burnt down actually.
Yeah.
A few months ago.
Well, don't get me started on that.
Recycling in Canberra, if it is recycled, actually gets shipped to Sydney or Melbourne to be recycled.
Not to be recycled, to be warehoused. Yeah, to be warehoused and then burned down. We have
the carbon emissions associated and all the diesel fuel emissions from trucking, all this pollution everywhere. But people think that when they've put it in the recycling bin, there's no consequences.
Well, Gregory, were you one of the people like me that was separating their soft plastics and taking it down to supporting the red scheme? And then you find out that not only was it established with government money to establish it, there wasn't a process to audit the thing. So, and this is what drives me mad, that they have all these programs that get devised and supported, and public money gets poured into it, but there's never anything there about auditing it in terms of auditing the purpose. They might audit the financials, but no one ever goes, right, let's actually go and have a look at the recycling facility, shall we? Let's actually go and watch 40,000 tonnes go through today, and let's do a spot visit sometime in the next 6 weeks and see if it's actually happening or whether it was just put on for our visit. The lack of integrity in all of these things is staggering. And again, why I go back, why would anybody have any confidence in a scheme backed by the forestry industry, the agriculture industry, or the mining industry on biodiversity integrity? Why would anybody? Questions if you want, folks. I do like that Naomi understands my. I know you do.
Me, I've got to save my voice.
Yeah. So here's the opportunity for questions. Now I want to recommend that you all go and follow Jung and Chi 1, and I'll let me put this in. I'll do a banner so that you can all go and have a look at this thread, because someone's done all the work, read all the submissions, and been involved in publicising them. So on Twitter, that's the account to follow, to read the summaries of so many of these submissions to the nature repair market inquiry. Now, Gregory, while we've got you, we've talked a few times about the legislation that the government was reviewing. We had the Samuels report, and it's been delivered. Why is it taking them so long to actually deliver this new legislation?
Look, I actually don't know. I think it's actually great that it's being discussed, because the last government didn't even sat on the report and probably would never have released it. But I don't know, because I'm not following it that closely. I feel like I should be, because I'm your guest on this show. But, you know, like I said, I do my best as an individual, and then I participate in discussion and debate, but I don't have time to look at everything. And also, I feel like I have to give myself a break from it. Otherwise, it's too depressing. You can get climate grief and eco-anxiety. So I actually sometimes actively choose not to read and not to engage, and to get out and do stuff like cultural burning or regeneration at Wombat Ridge, or
I want to ask you about that though, Gregory. Not the cultural burning. Again, we really have to do another show on the impact on Indigenous peoples with some of these decisions. I mean, I didn't want to bring that up in the heat of this debate about the voice, because that's got to play out, I think. That has to play out, and we're seeing enough divisiveness and misinformation in that discussion at the moment. But echo grief, I think, is a real thing, and doom scrolling. I mean, I certainly, this morning I was retweeting so many things that I saw. I always do that on a Sunday and a Monday. And so much of it was bad. But what struck me, the government is not leading these discussions. The government has not been involved in these discussions, and that's disappointing to me, that they should be leading the debate and like shepherding the debate. And they've been voted in. They have a direction that they said they've wanted to go in. So why don't they just go there? That's what I don't understand. But here's a couple of questions. Naomi's got it seems a little hopeless from an individual perspective. Where or what would you think is the best way to change things? Oh, that's a good question.
I think it's really from the grassroots up. And I do think while we have to be honest about the severity of the problems, we also need to have positive solutions and positive discussions, because otherwise people turn off. Like I know quite a few people that I know who are good friends or family, and what they're saying is right to me, but I just don't want to hear it all the time, the doomsday stuff. So I think what we need to do is what I was, like I said, I was really excited to see this 96-year-old man blockading a coal train in Newcastle. And I was like, the role modelling that sends and the messaging that it sends, that this is mainstream. These are mainstream people. That old man, if he's 96 and he's like a European Australian male, he probably voted Liberal for most of his life.
Oh, we can't jump on that, because if he was a European male, he may as well have been. He could well have been a refugee that was a socialist after the war. We don't know that.
Anglo-Saxon Australian, but anyway, and then Isaac, this young guy who's blind, who's climbed up there, the bravery that he showed, just the physical bravery of climbing on top of one of those huge coal trucks. So I think what we need to do is we need to get people engaged, and we need to make sure that we don't encourage them to turn off by too much negativity. But at the same time, we've got to be honest and we've got to hold people account. And the single best thing the government can do is actually develop and implement strong laws to protect the environment and protect nature, including having a safe level of CO2 in the atmosphere, and then to implement those laws. So like Chevron, which is the biggest emitter under the
safeguard mechanism.
Safeguard mechanism. It actually, I think it made a promise 5 years ago that by now it would be sequestering 80% of its emissions. It would be pumping the 80%.
That's right. Under carbon capture and storage, the unicorn of technology.
So it hasn't kept its promise. It's only sequestering about 30% or something. So it needs to be held accountable for that. And that's where we need to have not only strong laws but implement them.
Now, but there's another thing that
somebody just asked about housing estates. That actually is probably my Achilles heel for negativity. There's a horrible one called Bubbling Creek just in Queanbeyan across the road, across the border from Canberra. Just about every housing estate I see is wholesale cleared. Every tree is cleared.
Well, that's the way they do it. They scalp everything and then they fill to contour.
We don't need that. And there are some examples in Canberra. There's two examples. There's a development called Urambi Village in Tuggeranong, and there's one in Belconnen called Wyverlina Grove, where they have the same number of houses that they would normally have, but they've kept about 2/5 of the bush at least, and then the houses are all medium density, but they're designed and integrated with the bush so that when you're in each house, you have a beautiful aesthetic view looking out and you feel like you're in the bush. So you've got more people living more densely populated, but you're protecting at least part of the nature that was there. We definitely need to get a lot smarter at that.
And every adjoining development has to have an area that connects with the adjoining development, so that you don't get isolated pockets of 1 hectare, so that you can get groups of 3, 4, 5 hectares connected with another group of 3, 4,
now,
5 hectares.
I'm running out of voice.
Yep. So you've got another. We have got another one. Martin's just following up. What commitments are expected? I'm a bit unsure, Martin, what commitments do you mean? Gregory, what commitments do you think that let's keep it on the housing estates? Should nearly all the standing timber be left on a housing development these
All
days?
of the old growth trees should definitely be left, because old growth trees are the trees that have habitat for wildlife. And I know in the northern suburbs in the ACT, they did that in Gungahlin and all of the new housing estates out there. You'll see all these beautiful old gum trees that might look a bit sort of lonely at first because they'll be in a weird little shaped park. But it's because when the housing development was done, it was grazing land, but they kept all the paddock trees because superb parrots and different rosellas all use those. So I definitely habitat trees should stay.
I live in the area of Melbourne where we have native grasslands are the major vegetation community. And because and they were protected, large areas of them were protected in the late 70s, 80s, 90s through to 2000. But now because they're only grass, right? They're only grass. The pressure's really on. There's a move to try and condition people into, but there's no trees. They're not protecting anything. So this is the land we should develop. And look how much of it there is because they managed to protect so much of it. So we really need to be aware of important ecosystems are not necessarily trees.
So it might be habitat trees or like it might be grassland earless dragon habitat.
Yep.
And then if that's the case, we need to do our best to keep and protect that. And actually the EPBC Act does say that. So a lot of it, again, is about strengthening our laws, but also just
enforcing them, enforcing the laws. But there's so many exemptions given under those laws, though, too, and that's a big flaw. I mean...
Yeah. Now, we haven't talked a lot about birds, which is the kind of hook, but I think we've had a really good discussion on what's needed to protect them and the habitat they live in. And I'm going to have to go soon because I've got to put my... I've got to save my things.
You can go whenever you.
Tell I'm getting a bit croaky.
Yeah. Croaky. You're croaky and I'm cranky. So
yeah. But I do appreciate what you do, and that's why I always enjoy coming on your show, even though I don't swear enough to be.
I know. Well, I'm the only one who gets to do all the bad swearing.
I never swear, actually.
But see, Gregory, that's because you're a much nicer person than I am.
I don't even have to try not to swear. Like I just never swear. But actually, occasionally, if I kick my toe, or when you hit your knee on something hard, so occasionally, then I will use the F word.
Well, do you know that people causing wanton environmental destruction actually upsets me more than dropping something heavy on my toe? So that's kind of why.
And actually, just to finish off, I think one thing we mentioned the voice briefly, but there's somebody, Linda Burney and Mark Dreyfus, and our Prime Minister, I should say, are all doing, I think, a great job on The Voice, but particularly Minister Linda Burney. So I just wanted to just say how happy that makes me to know that despite some feral negativity, the overwhelming majority of Australians are already behind it. And actually, statistically, 80% of Aboriginal people like me support The Voice. And I personally don't know anyone who's Aboriginal, who's a friend or family member of mine who doesn't support The Voice. And for me,
So,
it's really
so
about two things. It's about recognition, just like we do recognition or acknowledgement of country. The constitutional recognition is just acknowledging country, and the voice is just about saying, and we're willing to listen. So I just hope everybody keeps that positive momentum going forward.
yeah, look,
Yeah.
I personally will be diving into some of those issues when I can get more voices involved in it. I mean, I absolutely support the voice. I'm not wedded to any particular model. Constitutional change is difficult, but I cannot believe that anybody is mounting a no case based on the historical situation of this country, of what we have repeatedly done in this country. I reckon it shows a massive block in the way people look at the history of this country and this idea that you can't approve something in the Constitution that might lead to a High Court challenge. Well, then, why do we have a High Court? If you don't want any challenges, if nothing in the Constitution at the moment can be challenged, why do we even have a High Court? The fact is that people always challenge laws. They always want a new interpretation. The idea that a change might lead to the High Court hearing
point.
it's
healthy.
insane.
It's healthy for the High Court to examine our Constitution. But anyway, I think to finish off, I'm really looking forward to the voice getting voted on and Australia becoming and when we all vote yes, the majority of us vote yes, and it'll be a sort of an affirmation of Australia that we're a grown-up country, that we've grown up, and that we're a kind and inclusive country that acknowledges our past and walks together. Yeah, so
I don't want to contradict you too much, but I'm going to. I would say,
because you're very
hang on. I want you to see whether you agree with this. Not that we are a kind and inclusive country, but that we are taking a massive step to becoming a more kind and inclusive country. We got a long way to go.
I think most Australians already support the voice.
Definitely.
And that's because, like most of us, so that if the majority of, there's always going to be pockets of like hate, but Australia, Australia, I believe, will vote yes because we are a kind and inclusive country, and we won't be duped or sucked in by the myths that are being promulgated about the voice.
Yeah, so come on, Queensland and Western Australia. We need Queensland and Western Australia to vote yes, and then it's a sure thing.
Yeah. Anyway, hey, thanks so much for having me on your show. And,
we'll do it. We'll do it again. Again.
And I wish Polly had been here to help save my voice, so I could have learnt more about the safeguard mechanism and what it's not safeguarding.
Polly did say that she just wants to organise it again, so we'll see what we can do. I really want to get Polly back on, or Polly on, to address the whole credits for biodiversity and for carbon, because that's her specialty, but also the broader general issues about how we approach the conversations in the country. I think that's as important as the nuts and bolts. It is.
It's really important.
Yeah.
Okay. Good talking to you, Grant.
Nice to see you again, Gregory. Just jump out any time you can.
All right. See ya.
All right. So there we are, gang. Just me. I want to talk to you more about what's happening with Holly, but do any of you have any other things you want to raise about the discussion that was just had? It's a difficult one to have in an audio sense, because so much of it is facts and figures and percentages and whatnot. But I still lean towards the people who say there's 20 years of experience with biodiversity offset markets, and there still is no clear evidence of them being effective. There are isolated, targeted things like Gregory mentioned in Chesapeake Bay, where you're looking to reduce concentrations of certain minerals, certain pollutants. You can reforestate areas that have been degraded. There's no doubt that those things can work. But is the most effective way actually the government funding targeted projects? Or do we need that interface with private markets? Why don't we just tax industry, and then the government can spend that money on targeted projects? There's so many of them that have been effective, and they're small and they're targeted. Now, we wouldn't need them if we didn't cut down the rest of the crap, right? Or the rest of the important habitat. We wouldn't always be talking about needing to pump out more and more hollows for hollow-dependent species if we stopped cutting down all of the existing hollows. So, anyway, you've all heard my position on this many, many, many times before. I had framed the discussion with Gregory and Polly that we would try and end on what have been the successes. And in our little emails that were bouncing back and forward, I said, positive examples, what are they? Well, I couldn't find any that are anything other than extremely local projects, not country-wide, industry-wide examples. So, I think, there's a big battle going on in America where, that triple bottom line concept that I know I've talked about on the show before, that I was learning about in year 11 and year 10. We're talking the 80s, that I was learning about in the 80s. Just now, there's a big conservative movement in America to try and legislate so that companies cannot use a triple bottom line approach in their accounting, in the way they organise their affairs and their operations. We've actually gone back 40 years, nearly 50 years in some ways, in some countries. But I guess that's the battle. It is a political battle, because when people are seeing their look, I know I've said it before too. Where are the Coopers and the wheelwrights? Because that's what these industries are nowadays. They're the coach builders of years gone by. Their industry is sunsetting. I'm all for a soft landing for the investors and all that. We don't want people to lose everything overnight. Transition them out, but don't let them hang on. Imagine if we were still paying a proportion of Australia's, or anywhere in the world's, gross domestic product to wheelwrights, Coopers, tinkers. It sounds laughable, sounds ridiculous, right? But that's effectively what we're doing for the fossil fuel industry now. We can see that it's dead. And it would be like subsidising the printing of newspapers nowadays. And just think about it. How many of you read a newspaper nowadays? Imagine if we were saying, right, we're going to give a 300% tax benefit for the production of every bit of publicity material must be printed out and distributed, rather than getting it online where people are actually consuming it. You'd say that was bonkers, wouldn't you? Anyway, I do. I would and I do. So, let me go back to the good news. I'm so glad. I'd been waiting for Millie to get back to me on an email. She did yesterday. I'm going to join her in Rockhampton. Excuse me. I'm going to join her in Rockhampton, and then we're going to go up the coast to Cairns, and then across to Normanton, and then down to Mount Isa, across to Tennant Creek, and then up to Darwin, and then I think Millie's got Darwin to Broome organised, but if she hasn't got somebody at that point for all of that leg, I'll go on that leg as well. There's massive subsidies for the mining industry, Naomi, but people don't really know about them. They get insanely positive tax treatments, and in a lot of cases, they're supposed to pay royalties, and in a lot of cases, those royalties are deferred or forgiven. Mining industries are not treated like restaurants are, and more people work in restaurants in Australia than work in the mines. Probably more people work in newsagents and Tatslotto agencies than work in the mines. It's a bit like the forestry industry. Try and get a clear indication of how many people are actually involved in forestry. They always want to talk about all the people who are involved in all the allied industries, but it's very, very difficult to get a handle on how many people are actually completely reliant on forestry. Naomi, good question. Will I be catching aeroplanes to all these inland towns or buses and trains for shorter trips? Okay. Now, Millie has the microlight, but the microlight is supported by a four-wheel drive, which is Millie's ute, and a trailer. And Millie flies approximately 300 kilometres for each leg of her journey. And at the end of that journey, that vehicle and that trailer has to meet Millie. So, no, I will be flying. I think that's the way it's working. I haven't found another solution, but if you know anyone who is going to Brisbane and would like to give me a lift to Brisbane or further up the coast, I'd rather hitch a ride than get a plane. So I will be driving the support vehicle from Rocky and up, following Millie on her journey. And, of course, Millie is doing school visits along the way as well. So she's had fantastic hospitality from people along the way. And so wherever sometimes staying with people, but we'll both be with our swags and all the camping gear and whatnot. So I'm certainly expecting that from Cairns going west will be mostly camping, although there are some station visits, I think, that are lined up. We haven't really, well, I haven't worked out. It doesn't really matter. I just arrive and then Millie and I go wherever Millie needs to go. That's how it's going to work. For me, it's very exciting because I'm going to go birding in a lot of places that I have not been for a long time. I think the last time I was in Rocky would have been the mid to late 90s. Got to have a look at the map and try and organise to meet a lot of bird nerd folk along the way. Get to use my camera, or both. I'm taking 2 cameras so that I can actually do more spots with Millie. Contemplating. Actually, tell me this. Am I prepared? Yep, I'm prepared. Yep. We're prepared. I'm certainly prepared. I used to. It's what I used to do when I had my Land Rover. I used to just head out places and just go. And with the swag, just sleep wherever. I'm a little bit more. I'm glad I'll be with someone this time because I'm a lot more reticent about the idea of just going and sleeping, off the side of the road on my own these days. I don't know whether it's like less safe than it used to be, but it never used to enter my mind. The thing I'm most concerned about, there's this new deal at the moment for you can buy the Starlink equipment, satellite equipment for a couple of $100. So I'm thinking of buying that, and that will be our window to the world. And then I'll be able to keep doing First Seen and Heard every morning, because otherwise there's not a lot of 4G, even 3G connectivity once you get out past Mount Isa. So I would like to be. I'd like to be able to keep doing First Seen and Heard each morning with different birds, and I've been backing up a whole heap of podcast episodes so that you don't lose touch with me. Well, because it could be 2 months. It could be longer. So at least the podcast stuff will still be going out. And I would be looking to do shows like this when I knew that we would be staying in a town somewhere for a couple of days where at least I might be able to use internet at a motel or something like that. So we'll see what we can organise. I'm taking most of my podcast gear so that we can record things as we go. I'm expecting that we'll meet some amazing birding people. I know Millie's been meeting people all the way along the way. So if you're in Rocky, anywhere north, and across inland, north inland Queensland, the Gulf Country, out to Darwin. Now I think we're doing Tennant Creek up to Darwin. I don't think we're going sort of in country. I just don't think Millie's sort of able to organise that. I don't know. We'll see. We haven't talked about the exact route. If there's stations or something we could go, we might. But for Millie, the main thing is to get to the schools to do those school visits. Naomi, yes, it's most places find a camp. I've actually got one of those books, Free Campsites for Australia as well. So that'll be coming with me as well. Millie and I had to have that discussion yesterday. Millie said, "What? So, what do you like?" Millie's a very private person, likes a lot of on her own time, and I'm a bit the same these days. I'm gregarious, but I like being on my own too. So I think Millie was worried that I'd be following around going, hey, Millie, what do you think of this? Hey, Millie, hey, Millie, hey, Millie. So, yeah, no, there's going to be plenty of on our own time. So I'm going to try and become a good photographer and practice a lot with short videos while I'm out there. And while Millie's in the air and I'm driving, of course, there's going to be downtime. So I'll just be trying to, oh, goodness gracious. I don't know why I'm so tired. Probably because I was so excited yesterday thinking about the adventure. I'll try and produce lots of little clips that can upload along the way. I won't be able to do long videos because apart from I won't be able to process them the way I normally do while I'm away, even if we've got the satellite Starlink, I think the upload won't be anywhere near good enough to do what I would normally do here. But I might be able to upload, 3 and 5 minute clips to the YouTube. I won't be able to do everything. We just won't have the time to be connected. I wouldn't have thought. So make sure you're following the YouTube channel. That would be my big tip for the moment. Make sure you are following on the YouTube channel, which is The Bird Emergency. You can find it, thebirdemergency.com/YouTube, and we'll do the whatever social media we can, I guess. It's going to be a bit of a surprise for me. I think seeing how much connectivity there is / isn't. Once you get 100 k's west of Cairns, be very, very interesting. So there's the news. There's the news. Now tell me, if you're still here and you're a member, do you want a member show on Wednesday, or do you want me to put it into next week? Give me an indication. I haven't got anything prepared yet for Wednesday. I was going to launch something else on Wednesday, but I'm going to hold it off. Sunday is my birthday, and I'm going to launch something on. I'm going to launch something on Sunday, which will be. It's a bad time to launch when 2 or 3 weeks later I'm going to be off the scene for a little while, but I can schedule some things. But I'm going to try and get all of my things into one, or most of my things into one place that drives more discovery. None of the social platforms are that great at driving discovery within that platform, and it's getting harder and harder to use, especially Twitter, to use Twitter as something to drive discovery. And I think, as you know, the whole point of doing this has always been about highlighting the state of birds and bird conservation. So, yeah, but I'll leave it until this Sunday to announce it. Okay, Naomi. Well, in that case, Naomi is, and I'm glad you explained that you'd been on a trip, because I was worried about where you'd been. I actually was asking, has anyone seen Naomi? What's going on with Naomi? Afternoon Wednesday. Is 2 o'clock too late? I want to have a sleep in. And I need to spend some time reading a whole lot of stuff and also sourcing like places along the way, places of interest, and we want to do some birding with some tours maybe if we can organise it. So okay, well there we go. Naomi and I have just decided 2 p.m. Wednesday will be the members only show. If you are currently receiving those members emails, you will get the link. Everyone is invited to come in on the studio and talk about their experiences. What I loosely want to have for the topic for the members show is your best sort of camping or out in the wild experience. Doesn't have to necessarily be bird related, but of course if it is bird related, that's a bonus. But maybe some reminiscing on, an amazing, a place that in your memory stands apart as a wonderful place that you've been, or a terrific sort of experience that you've had in the wild, maybe under canvas. And maybe if you've been camping, if you've been touring in that area to the west of Cairns, tell us a cool spot. Tell us a really cool spot that we should venture into. That would be cool. That would be cool. Okay, I'm going to drop that now. I am going to pop that. I do want you to go and check out Jung and Chi 1. Well worth it on Twitter. Now I need to speak with Ricky too about whether we're doing Friday. I hope we are, but I know Ricky's been synthesizing some thoughts about more little brown birds, but we haven't actually worked out what. We were going to try and talk fairy wrens this week, but we haven't had that conversation. So we'll have that conversation today or tomorrow, and we'll work out what's happening on Friday. And then it's Holly and Carly Campbell. So we're talking more urban birds, but more specifically, Carly's work about the numbers of urban birds that, and Carly did her work under Daryl Jones. So maybe the week after I'll try and speak with Daryl and grill him on what he's been in Kuala Lumpur long enough now that he should have a pretty reasonable yard list, and maybe we can talk more about that. So anything anyone wants to say before I wrap up for today's Monday with Grant? I promise I am speaking with Polly again, so we'll get something going. Really looking forward to talking to Polly. I was probably a bit grumpy today, wasn't I, about everything, but that Juice Media clip. Actually, do you want me to play the Juice Media clip again? I better take that off loop as well. I'll play it again. So you've got 3 minutes, 42 seconds to think of another comment or question for me if you've got one. Otherwise, I'll play this and then I'll come back and bid you adieu.
Hello, I'm from the Australian Government. Last year, we legislated our 2030 emissions target, a symbolic achievement. But the real question now is, how will we reach that target? And today, we're here to unveil the policy that answers that question. Introducing the Safeguard Mechanism. After a wasted decade under the last government, we know you elected us to take real climate action. Thankfully, the shit party set the bar so low, we could come up with a shit light policy and you'd still applaud us for it. So that's what we've done. Safeguard Mechanism. To be honest, it's not even our policy. That's right. The best part of the Safeguard Mechanism is it's made from recycled materials, which we got from the previous government. It was brought in by this prick to safeguard the coal and gas industry. So we thought, hey, if it ain't broke, why fix it? So we just tweaked it, stuck our logo on it, and voila, reintroducing the Safeguard Mechanism, or as we call it, S&M, because it'll hurt the planet, make it all hot and wet, but you'll love it. Because it's a Labor policy, except it's not. Fuck you. Safeguard Mechanism. If passed by Parliament, our repackaged shit-light Safeguard Mechanism will safeguard the coal and gas industry for the rest of this decade. Because let's be clear, the only way humanity currently knows how to reduce actual emissions is simple. Stop fucking digging up new coal and gas. Which is why the science says that's what we must do. Does the Safeguard Mechanism do that? Yeah, nah. That's why we still have over 100 new coal and gas projects awaiting approval. All the Safeguard does is force them to buy carbon credits to offset their emissions. Not all their emissions, just a tiny bit of another tiny part of their emissions. Which might sound like an incentive until you remember fossil fuel companies made this much profit last year alone. So the cost of buying credits to avoid reducing their actual emissions comes to approximately fuck all. Does the Safeguard at least limit how many credits they can buy? No, which means our mates can even increase emissions, pay to offset them with credits and still claim to be net zero. Given our climate policy relies entirely on carbon credits, it would be a real shame if those credits turned out to be bullshit. Thankfully, we just held an inquiry into their integrity, and who better to appoint to it than people linked to the carbon credit industry? But don't worry, the inquiry looked at all the evidence from the ANU, evidence the inquiry itself commissioned, even evidence from companies that sell carbon credits, all of which suggests they're mostly bullshit, and then concluded they're essentially sound, cool and normal. By now you're probably wondering, if our policy to reach our 2030 target doesn't stop new coal and gas projects, doesn't reduce most emissions from existing ones, lets them buy infinite credits to offset emissions with credits that don't offset emissions, does it really do anything? Oh, sweetie, sure it does. It distracts you with bullshit so our mates can keep making the ching-ching for the rest of this decade. Australian Government. New government, same climate shit fuckery. Authorised by the Department for ensuring our 2030 target is a floor, not a ceiling.
Thank you to all our patrons for making the Honest Government ads possible, especially our patron producers. If you want to help us keep governments honest, you can do so at patreon.com/The Juice Media, or you can grab some merch from our store. You'll find all the links in the video description. Till next time. Subscribe now, or else.
Star of that Juice Media, Ellen Burbidge. She's just great, isn't she? She's so good. Thanks, Naomi. I'm trying to get less fired up, but it's impossible to because we're being gaslit so much. And I really want to support the good things the government is doing. But, hey, my show's about birds, right? My show's about the environment. My show is about that critical habitat that we need to save around the world. And just the amount of gaslighting is unbelievable. And if it comes to taking Chris Bowen's word for something, or someone who works in applied ecology or is a practical conservationist, I'm always going to err on the side of the birds. I'm an activist. I'm a protagonist. Someone on the ABC wants to give me a job. I'll I'll do the both sides thing, but I'll still make judgments. And I think I'm upfront with you guys when, often I'll take a standpoint and I'll tell you why I take it. Anyway, I'm just some mug in front of a microphone in a bloody bedroom that's dressed up to look like a studio. I mean, for crying out loud. God, I'd love one of those studios. Imagine having all the gear tricked up and the resources to have like a researcher and someone to edit the stuff for you. And gee, I'd put out thousands of these things instead of just hundreds. Oh! I did do a little bit of... I've been watching just my podcast stats lately because I'm getting close to a significant milestone, which I'll probably tell you about on Sunday. I reckon we might have passed it on Sunday. If we've passed it tomorrow, I'll tell you. But I saw somebody who much bigger, like a big organisation, much bigger than me, obviously. And they were touting some statistic. So I looked at the same thing. Did you know that just for the podcast, not for live streams or videos or anything else, and any of the social media clips I put up, like the First Seen and Heards one on, but people have consumed more than 3.5 million minutes of the Bird Emergency. 3.5 million minutes of listening to me. Me and, of course, the stars of the show. Now, can you believe that? 3.5 million minutes. So, sounds impressive, doesn't it? Hey? So I'm thinking of doing a T-shirt. 3.5 million minutes. I don't know what the tagline will be, but that's pretty cool. Hey, yeah. Thanks, Naomi. 3.5 million minutes. So it's going to be more now because I'm. Oh, and Gert and the Pacific Megapode from Tonga. That episode will go up tomorrow morning, so you'll be able to listen to it tomorrow. I'll probably throw this out tomorrow, Gregory's portion of this stream. And yeah, there's piles to come up. Bruce Richardson, Dawn Chorus is up there, of course, for the members. And I'm going to hold Ricky's shows back for general release for while I'm away in the pod feeds. I knew this trip with Millie was in the works, so I've been holding back a lot of things so that I can schedule them for when I plan to be away. And I'm also hoping that not terribly long after Millie and my trip is done, or my portion with Millie will still be got to get all the way around to Perth. I'm planning to be in KL, maybe Bali, maybe go and do the Bali Starling on the way. If I can afford it, I'll go Bali Starling and then KL and hopefully meet up with Daryl Jones, and then from KL go into the Philippines and try and catch up with some of the works being done. Catch up with the Philippines Eagle Foundation, the Philippine Cockatoo Foundation, which we did before, but also then the Bleeding Hearts and the Cebu flowerpecker and the hornbills. There's a lot of birds in the Philippines that I want to chase down, and because I know some people there, I can generally make the Philippines far more cost effective for me to go and spend some time. So, yeah, maybe an awful large part of the second part of this year, I might not be sitting in the studio. I might actually be out talking to people in the flesh, doing bird stuff. So, yeah, that'd be great. All right, folks, subscribe to the YouTube. That's going to be the best thing I would tell you. Certainly Facebook as well, but YouTube is where I'm going to be trying to upload while I'm away. We've got a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks before that that becomes an issue, and I'll be letting you know all about it as the details come up. I'm expecting Millie to give me some more information today. If you know anyone who's up that way or is travelling up to Brisbane or Rockhampton in the next little while, let me know. And if you know anyone who's using Starlink, let me know. I would love to know if it's going to be suitable for what we might need to do. Okay, great seeing you all. Especially good to see you back in the riot squad, Naomi. Thanks, Stormy. Who else do we have with us today? Stormy, Martin. Oh, Martin, I probably should try and catch up with you, shouldn't I? If I'm going to be up that way. Yeah, tell me if that's a possibility. We'll organise it. I'm Grant. I'm a bird nerd. See you later, folks. Live, the members show tomorrow. What did we say? 2:00. See ya.